If someone asked you, who is Jesus? Do you know how you would answer that? One of the ways that you would do it is to go to the readings for Christ the King Sunday. Who is Jesus? Who is God? Is what you've already already heard. Why is Jesus? Now you will hear that. The Holy Gospel according to Luke chapter 23.
Glory to you, O Lord.
When the parade of people came to the outside of the skirts of Jerusalem, and they came to the place that is called the Skull, they crucified Jesus there with the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. Then Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. And the people cast lots to divide his clothing, and the people stood by watching, but the leaders scoffed at Jesus, saying, He saved others. Let him save himself, if he is the Messiah of God, the chosen one. The soldiers also mocked Jesus, coming up and offering him sour wine and saying, If you are the King of the Jews, save yourself. There was also an inscription over him that said, This is the King of the Jews. One of the criminals who were hanged there, deriding him, said, Are you not the Messiah? Save yourself and us. But the other rebuked the other thief, saying, Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed have been justified or condemned justly, for we are getting what we deserve for our deeds, but this man has done nothing wrong. And then the thief said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus replied, Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Today our lives are full. And we come with the hopefulness of Thanksgiving. No school, right? Right, teachers? Yeah. The hope and the promise of a break, of endless football, of decorations everywhere, of music perhaps changing if it hasn't already. We look ahead today with the congregational meeting coming and all the things that are happening this week and into the weeks ahead. We are filled with celebrations. We are filled with expectations, and we are filled with hope. And today we celebrate that and pay attention to that through our worship, through our music, through our learning, and through our fellowship. 3 days of holiday. Thanksgiving gatherings for families, hours upon hours of TV, annual Christmas specials starting up, which are, most of them are fairy tales, really, that have very little to do with the birth of Jesus Christ. Then there's that Black Friday when the stores open their doors, and they're doing it even earlier, for the floods of people with one chant in mind. Veni, vidi, visa. I came, I saw, I shopped. And now with the gospel today, isn't it just like God to break into our Black Friday spending with Good Friday giving? Isn't it just like God to give us God's promises so that we don't get lost in the fairy tales of the TV season, a Grinch with too small of a heart, a Christmas tree with a blanket wrapped around it, a snowman with a hat on top, a red-nosed reindeer, a do-good angel, and on and on and on and on and on. Isn't it just like God to surprise us today with the cross? Just as we're setting up the cradle and our nativities and getting ready for Christmas at Bethany. Some of us already are singing those Christmas carols. Some of us already have our cradles set up. Mangers ready for the cute and cuddly and innocent baby, born a child and yet a king. Born a child and yet a king. Isn't it just like God to enter into our celebration and expectation and hope with this King who breaks the Guinness World Book of Records for expectations? This child is Christ the King, the firstborn of all creation. All things have been created through him and for him. This Christ is the Messiah for whom the world has waited in painful and hopeful expectation. But the pomp and circumstances of kingliness is once again hidden. Not in the indignity of an animal-heated stable filled with animal smells, but this time his kingliness is hidden in the indignity of death and the promise of resurrection. This Messiah, who is God, has a calling for each one of you. Perhaps you've heard that call. And what God will call you to do will change your life, and it will change every expectation that you have of yourself, of your faith, and of God's purpose for this church. Isn't it just like God to pronounce kingly forgiveness while wearing a crown of thorns? Two criminals join Jesus, and all three are suffering a criminal's fate, death by crucifixion, the most ugly thing that humans have ever devised for inflicting punishment on another human being. One dares to repeat what the angry crowd has already taunted. Are you not the Messiah? And did you notice, though, that this criminal does not commit himself to believing even though he is dying? But listen to the question again. Are you not the Messiah? It's filled with hope and expectations. Because if Jesus can save himself, then Jesus can save that criminal too. Right? But the other thief speaks before Jesus starts to speak and answer. The other thief already knows the truth that Jesus is innocent. Perhaps he glimpses that in this Jesus of Nazareth is the King of the world, where all the fullness of God is pleased to dwell, as this beautiful hymn from Colossians opens up for us that you heard read. And that through Jesus, God is pleased to bring all things back into the promised good relationship with God. That's what reconcile means. To make a broken relationship right again. Isn't it just like God to make peace on earth and in heaven through the blood of the cross? And then this thief says something shocking. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Remember me, Jesus. Keep me in your mind. Don't forget me. Isn't that what we all plead? Jesus, don't forget me. And his plea is answered with a promise, and the promise is also for you. Surely you will be with me in paradise. Probably the most hopeful words ever spoken. Can you begin to imagine the relief that this thief must have felt? He knew he was dying. He's broken one of the precious 10 commandments, you shall not steal. And God through Jesus, forgives him. Even while he's hanging on a cross, receiving punishment for his trespass publicly in front of all of these people, even while he is dying, Jesus forgives him. Can you hear that for you? And for the people that you know are dying, whether you want them to or not. Isn't it just like God to model forgiveness from the cross? If Jesus is this generous with his forgiveness, in what other ways and situations is Jesus already generous too? If Jesus does not judge the ones who kill him, then what does it mean for my own judgmental tendencies or yours? Where else is Jesus forgiven people, and how might Jesus forgive you and me? Just what is forgiveness anyway? And how does it work? We're not very good at it. So maybe we really don't understand it. We say it in our Apostles' Creed. We say it in the Lord's Prayer. But what does it mean for us? Well, throughout his lifetime, Jesus teaches about relationships. Listening to others, caring for others, building one another up. Forgiveness is a relational word. Forgiveness has to do with how we deal with one another. And isn't it important when we know the families are gathering this week that we talk about the word forgiveness? We don't sit in separate rooms on Thanksgiving. We sit together acknowledging that we are in relationship, whether we've chosen that relationship or not. Forgiveness has to do with how we deal with one another, especially after some wrong thing has been spoken or done, or some broken thing happens which has caused a continental divide in our private worlds. When that relationship of brokenness is total and very hurtful, it can only be healed with the help of the Creator. Because forgiving is the step toward healing. Sometimes only one side of the relationship is healed. Sometimes both sides of the relationship are healed and the relationship can be restored. As many of you already have witnessed in your lives, forgiveness is very hard work. One of my favorite authors who I offer to people as we're talking about forgiveness, his name is Lou Smedes. He's a theologian and a professor of Christian ethics, and he wrote about forgiveness that he learned in his 81 years. He refers to forgiving as a radical spiritual surgery. And he writes this: to qualify for forgiving, we need only to meet 3 requirements. It's easy, 3 steps. First, we need to bear the wounds ourselves. Second, we need to know we have been wronged. And third, we need to have an inner push to forgive. If we don't have one of those 3, if we don't have all of those 3, it ain't going to happen. What does it mean? He goes on to explain. Forgiving is about healing wounds. Forgiving is the only way to heal the wounds of a past that we cannot change and we cannot forget. Forgiving restores self-respect. Forgiving restores a self-respect that someone else may have killed. Forgiving gives birth to hope. Hope for the future after our past illusions have been shattered. You know what I'm talking about. When we forgive, he explains, we bring light where there was darkness. We open the door to an unforeseen future that our painful past had shut. When we forgive, we take God's hand and we walk through that door and stroll into the possibilities that wait for us to make them real. So isn't it just like God to surprise us with forgiveness on the cross today? Because the cross changes the season. The cross changes our lives. The cross changes our relationships. Imagine the cross as a Christmas tree, stripped of its beauty and dignity, naked to the world, with arms outstretched in quiet beckoning, waiting for us to take the step into God's future. So how will the cross change you? Would you please stand? Let's sing.